midst of battle, there was nothing which could give one greater lift than to walk through a field surgical unit and see a group of young men who were all making a good recovery from wounds which were so serious that under any previous circumstances hardly any of the patients would have survived. Amid so much destruction and strife, it made one feel proud after all to know that men are also capable of such titanic reconstruction. Horrible though the incidents of war may be, the faith and the spirit of sacrifice shown by soldiers in the field have always proved the greatness of character which dwells in men. It is to be hoped that there may soon be discovered some way to an undivided use of the fine qualities which are possessed by all people on earth. Brigadier G.R.D. Farmer, 2 Canadian Corps, 1945. Dr. John Burwell Hillsman gave up a medical practice in Manitoba to serve as a battlefield surgeon in World War II. Technically, at the age of 41, he was too old to serve, but after creative interpretation of the rules, he was commissioned as a physician in the Canadian Army in 1944 and sent overseas. His experiences were recalled in the book 11 Men and a Scalpel, published in 1948.
My first contact with a field surgical unit was in East Anglia, a county in the English countryside, about 100 miles northeast of London. It was a case of love at first sight. These units pose a challenge to the surgeon which is irresistible. Designed to be highly mobile, flexible, and expendable, they promise relief from the boredom of routine and red tape. Equipped with the most modern of surgical instruments, the only limitation placed on the surgeon was that of his own technical ability. In battle order, the unit position was directly behind the field ambulance, and it was supposed to pick off those casualties too severely wounded to travel to the rear. The surgeon, as a consequence, would be confronted with operative problems that would tax his ingenuity to the utmost. This surgery, difficult enough in the quiet efficiency of the civilian hospital, would have to be done in a canvas operating theater placed in the middle of a bare field under the strictest blackout conditions. On occasions, he would have to work within range of the enemy guns and with the flimsy side of his tent convulsed by the blast of his own artillery. The flexible design of the unit promised surgery under a variety of conditions, ranging from the relatively static position of the casualty clearing station to the wild, nerve-wracking improvisations of beachhead assaults. Above all, it promised an unparalleled opportunity to observe the combat soldier in his natural habitat. It is readily seen that the training of such a unit is not an easy affair. The men must have stamina, as the unit is in continuous service, operating in 12-hour shifts for as long as 25 to 30 days. In exceptional circumstances, units have been known to operate 36 hours without sleep or relief. The unit is self-sufficient in tentage, sterilizers, vehicles, and electric lighting. It depends on the unit to which it is attached only for food and for aid in the post-operative care of its patients. The men must know how to pitch large hospital tents under conditions of rain, snow, or high wind. They must be able to erect this canvas in the blackest night without the use of flashlights. They must be able to repair and service the unit generator and to rig electric lights. They must be able to service and keep their trucks running and to read maps well enough to pick their way along the pitch-black roads in heavy war traffic under conditions ranging from sniping to actual shelling. Above all, they must know how to sterilize surgical instruments and to set up the operating theater for major surgical operations. Each man must be able to assist at operations, and in case of sickness or injury, each must be capable of doing the other's work. To do this, the Army allowed us one surgeon, one anesthetist who could do surgery, and 9 other ranks. The surgical tent measured 30 by 15 feet. The generator weighed 900 pounds and ran 120 electric bulbs. All the equipment could be loaded into 3 vehicles, and enough surgical supplies were carried to do 100 major operations. With this, we began training attached to the casualty clearing station in January 1944 and prepared for the inevitable invasion of Europe some 6 months into our future. On the second night after landing in Normandy, we received orders to set up in the village of Secqueville, 3 miles north of Caen. The drive to Caen was to begin at dawn and would take all day. In time, we turned off the main road and drove into a field. It was very dark, but we managed to get some semblance of order in parking the vehicles. Word came back we were to sleep until daybreak. We crawled under the trucks and were asleep almost immediately. It was raining when we got up the next morning. All around us were huge hospital tents. It was so dark the night before, we didn't know they were there. 2 British casualty clearing stations with 4 British field surgical units had been working here for the past 4 days. We were to take over from them. We had a hurried breakfast and set up the canvas. By 10 o'clock, we were ready for cases. We decided to work 8-hour shifts, and we were assigned to the night sessions. The resuscitation officer and I wandered over to the British Center. We asked for the field surgical units, and soon we met a tall young Scot who was in command of them. His face was lined with fatigue, and his eyes had that hard, protective look we were all soon to acquire. One can't handle shattered and torn bodies day after day without turning off his emotional taps. This surgeon taught us the camaraderie of field surgeons. He took us around his ward and showed us his cases. We were humble in the face of the modest way he showed us case after case of surgical triumphs. We confessed we were beginners and told of our doubts in this new life we were about to start. He smiled. He assured us that in 3 days we would be experienced war surgeons and that everybody felt as we did at first. In spite of the fact that he had been operating for 12 hours and was moving up during the night, he promised to come and look our unit over. That afternoon he spent some 2 hours with us, giving us valuable suggestions of a practical nature and telling our men how well he knew they were going to do. When morning came, he was gone. 3 days later, we got word that an 88mm shell had landed in a rock quarry where he was working and had wiped out his entire unit. I felt a personal sense of loss, in spite of the fact I had known this kindly gentleman only a few hours. The time came for us to perform our first operation. The boys were standing by scrubbed and grinning, but it was obvious that they were a little nervous. I went into the resuscitation tent and had a talk with the transfusion officer. The tent was full of wounded, but I chose a trivial wound of the arm for our first case. I didn't want to take on a big case until the men's nervousness had cleared a bit. The case was brought in. The arm was painted and the operation began. Soon we were through. As I put on the bandage, I noticed the men were laughing and joking among themselves, proud as peacocks. I stepped into the resuscitation tent and chose an abdominal case. It went smoothly. From then on, we took the cases as they came. By morning, we were weary, happy unit, and I knew I had a team that could work with the best. We operated in Scalpel for 10 days and covered the attack that took the city of Caen. During those 10 days, we changed from mere soldiers to war-wise veterans. We saw the tragic sights from which we were never to be free for 10 long months. Men with heads shattered and gray, dirty brains oozing from the jagged margins of skull bones. Youngsters with holes in their chests fighting for air and breathing with a ghastly sucking noise. Soldiers with intestines draining feces under their belly walls and with their guts turned into a bloody mess by high explosives. Legs that were dead and stinking but still wore a muddy shoe. Operating floors that had to be scrubbed with Lysol to rid the theater of the stench of dead flesh. Red blood that flowed and spilled over while life held on by the slender thread of time. Boys who came to you with a smile and died on the operating table. Boys who lived long enough for you to learn their name and then were carried away in trucks piled high and with the dead. We learned to work with heavy guns, rocking and blasting the thin walls of our tent. We learned to keep our tent ropes slack so that anti-aircraft fragments would rain down harmlessly and bounce off the canvas. We became the possessors of bitter knowledge that no man has ever been able to describe. Only by going through it do you possess it.